this is a screencast on um, a exciting project called Drawdown. So I'm really excited to introduce this to you. But first, I need to give you a little bit more practical information about climate change. So there are two basic strategies to looking at combating the climate change problem. One of them is mitigation. So mitigation means anything that is trying to reduce or prevent greenhouse gases from being emitted in the first place. So trying to prevent methane gas leaks or trying to burn renewable energy to decrease CO2. Um, Adaptation is a strategy that means that, okay, we need to adapt to the effects of climate change. For example, building some type of flood barriers to protect low-lying areas against sea level rise. There is an overlap between mitigation and adaptation. For example, water and energy conservation. So using less energy means that we are burning less fossil fuels to produce it to begin with. It is also an adaptation, and it's actually money saving. So a lot of these adaptations and mitigations are are synonymous. So last year there was a big report that was released by the United States that looked at the effects of climate change in different regions. And I will show you where I'm actually printed them off. They're big documents. You can get them online. You can click on that link, and it's at the bottom of this slide. You can look at that, and you might be interested to what the report says about the northeastern United States, which is of course where we live. So they're predicting more extreme precipitation, coastal effects from rising seas, urban heat island effects. So that means that in places, in cities where there is more concrete and less green spaces, we know that there is more heating up there. And especially in areas that are low income because they tend to have less parks and less trees. And so that's another example of inequality in the effects of climate change for people of lower incomes. The other thing that is going to affect us is the lengthening of frost-free periods. So the earliest frost comes later, and the end of the frost or snow comes earlier. And that is going to affect the types of crops and plants and living things and how they are affected in our region. So in 2015, I had the opportunity to actually attend the United Nations Convention on Climate Change with my husband and our colleague and friend, Dr. Keith Peterman, and 8 amazing college students from all over the country. And we were actually there when the UN agreed on the Paris Agreement. I actually got into the actual convention. I was an observer, and I got to actually go to the talks. You know, Ban Ki-moon, who was the Secretary General of the UN, walked right by me, as did other world leaders, and I wrote, and I Zoomed and FaceTime with my classes, and it was an amazing experience. My husband and I participated with the students in a peaceful protest in Paris to try to get world leaders to hold global warming to 2 degrees C. And it was amazing because the world came together and signed this agreement. So the Paris Agreement, what is it and what did we get? Because this is important. A lot of people don't understand this. First of all, Nobody is telling us what our limits of carbon dioxide have to be. We as a nation determine that. So each country gets to determine their own CO2 um, levels that they're going to hold to. Nobody is telling us what to do. The other deal is that we are trying to hold the temperature rise to 2 degrees C, and we are trying to limit the temperature rise to 1.5 degrees C if we can. So we're trying to hold it within that level. All of the countries need to communicate and make their emissions and their policies transparent to everybody else. And everybody that signed this said that it's going to be a progression over time. So it's not going to start off with a bang, but it's going to progress towards those goals. It was open for signatures at the UN on Earth Day in 2016. The two biggest emitters of carbon dioxide, the United States and China, signed it on the same day in 2016. And the agreement entered force on November 4th, 2016. However, what happened is with the 2016 election, in 2017, the ambassador to the United Nations, Nikki Haley, told the countries in the UN that the United States was going to withdraw from the Paris Agreement. And because of the rules of the Paris Agreement, you have to have 3 years after you can't just withdraw, you have to have 3 years. And so, as an ironic twist of fate, we cannot formally withdraw from the Paris Agreement until November 4th, 2020, which, as you realize, is the day after the presidential election here in this country. So I will leave it to you to understand the impact of this election and what it would mean for the world's efforts to try to hold the effects of climate change to a minimum. It is interesting that we, along with one other Middle Eastern countries, are the only countries in the world that have not signed and have ratified the Paris Agreement. So one of the arguments that people in leadership in the United States have argued is that it's going to cost too much. So I think it's better to look at, well, what is climate change costing us now and what will it cost? So one of the things that is very well documented here by the NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, is that we have had a significant increase in billion-dollar disasters. And we understand why this is happening. It's because we have more extreme weather events. We also have warmer oceans, which fuel stronger storms. And so we are having historic wildfires, hurricanes, and flooding as a result of climate change that is happening now. And so even if you adjusted for how much money these natural disasters are costing us now by adjusting to the standard of living, cost adjustments over time, you can still see that it is costing us a lot more money now because of these natural disasters that are linked to climate change. This is also an excellent article that talks about it and summarizes it, and I would encourage you to click on this link and read this short summary article about how much money it's costing us now and how much it could cost in the future. So one of the pieces of information that I just showed you is even if we took modest action to curb emissions, it is still less money than if we did nothing, all right? So for example, if we look at heat-related deaths, if we do nothing about climate change and carbon dioxide emissions, that would cost us, with lost work and all those kinds of things, $141 billion a year. If we decreased modest carbon dioxide emissions per year, it would cost, less than half that. Coastal property damages, same thing that you see here. Deaths related to bad air quality, again, cheaper to do modest actions to reduce CO2 emissions than if we did nothing. So it was interesting, in 2018, two American economists won the Nobel Prize for Economics for their ideas to put a price on carbon dioxide pollution. So one of the problems with carbon dioxide pollution is that we don't smell it and we don't see it. And so people can dump carbon dioxide into the atmosphere that affects all of us, but it's not something that anybody sees. And so these are two ideas I'm going to share with you so that you can be aware of these. One of these is called a carbon price, or sometimes it's called a carbon tax. And it's like the idea with the cigarette tax, that if you put a tax on something, that it will decrease the emissions because it will have an incentive not to have those. And this has worked with soft drinks that have an increase in the health costs for all of us when people drink soft drinks, because that increases obesity and diabetes and heart attacks and all those kinds of things. And so the idea is to, and this is what Australia is doing, is they're putting a tax on carbon dioxide pricing in order to have incentive for people to decrease their emissions. Another idea, rather than having a carbon tax or a carbon price, is a cap and trade system. And this is what California is putting into practice. So the idea is that the state puts in an emission cap for carbon dioxides. And so industries have to meet that standard. If they don't, what they can do is they can say, okay, my emissions are going to be over that cap, so I can trade my carbon dioxide allowance with another company that has less. And so they would pay that other company. That gives an incentive for the other companies to have less CO2. And it's kind of an open market capitalistic way that companies can trade and make money from the idea that they are decreasing their carbon dioxide emissions. And a lot of people are excited about this because it's using free market strategies to decrease CO2. Many companies are starting to use these, and you can see over time, even since 2015, more and more countries around the world are using carbon taxes or cap and trade to lower CO2 emissions, and they're utilizing free market forces to do that. So one of the things I'm going to show you in just a minute is this amazing resource called Drawdown that has 100 solutions to reversing climate change. I want to show you that. And this is a video. You can either use the 9-minute version or the 14-minute version to just kind of give you a summary effect of the physical evidence on climate change and how that works. So I want to introduce to you the project that you're going to be working on, which is called Reach One. And the idea is that you are going to choose one person that you would like to elevate their climate literacy in some way by doing a project and then presenting it to them. So you can either do it one-on-one with a person, you can produce a brochure or a newsletter or a presentation or an interview or a video, and you can either have a one-on-one dialogue with someone or you can post it on social media. And the requirements are that you need to include a peer-reviewed scientific article on climate change that's within the past 5 years. You need to use at least 3 different slides from our climate change data set that I gave to you this week. You need to include 3 drawdown solutions that you can choose, the ones that are most interesting to you. And you can also give me a summary. So I want to see a picture or a video of your interview, or a screenshot of your post on social media, or I don't want you to videotape the whole interview. It could just be little snippets that you can take with your phone. And I would like for you to give me a 200-word summary, which is about 2 paragraphs, on the project, on your project and its impact. So I'm really excited to see what you do with this. And you can look at last year's class and some of the projects that they did. A lot of students did interviews, but some students did videos. A lot of students did news letters, and you can utilize your iPads to do this. The way where you're going to turn this in is this spreadsheet here. So I'm really looking forward to that. So I just wanted to show you, here is one student, Tina, that did this last year. She actually did an interview. So she made a presentation, slides on her iPad, and then she presented to a friend. And she also presented to her father. And so she gave a summary statement here about what that was like, and she included a video, just a short video of her interview with her participant.
So, after viewing the presentation, do you believe in climate change?
Yes, I do.
What information or facts stood out to you the most?
I always thought that too much carbon dioxide only affected the atmosphere, but I didn't know that it also affected oceans.
One of the solutions involved solar panels for the greenhouse effect. How do you feel about that solution?
Although solar panels may be expensive, I feel like it would be cheaper in the long run.
Awesome. So one of the things that I just want to point out to you is that it's really important to not ask your participant, do they believe in climate change? So science is not a belief, right? Because a belief means that you accept something beyond facts. So I have a personal religious belief, and my belief goes beyond facts, all right? So it's not about faith, it's not about a belief. What you can instead ask is, do you accept the scientific data for climate change? That would be a better question for you to ask. So now I want to show you Drawdown, Project Drawdown. So this is an amazing, uplifting website that has solutions for 100 different solutions we can do right now for reducing CO2 and helping to mitigate and adapt to carbon dioxide. So you can pick any of these that look interesting to you, and then when you click on them, so for example, this one is about just a plant-rich diet. So instead, decreasing the amount of meat that we eat. Doesn't mean everybody has to become vegetarians, but just decreasing meat a couple of times a week can help us. And this will tell us how many gigatons of carbon dioxide that we can decrease just by using this from now until 2050. And it gives a quick summary. You can see it's very short, and that really helps. One of the things that a lot of people don't know is that cattle actually burp methane. And you remember that methane is a it is a greenhouse gas that traps 4 times as much CO2 as carbon dioxide does. So having less cows means having less burping methane, and that's really important as well. So I'm really excited to see what you can do with these projects. I hope that you will use your creativity, use your iPads, and I look forward to seeing them. And I hope, most importantly, this has elevated your climate literacy, and I will see you in class.